enabler rather than being the bad guys, and helping organizations to improve. In 2011, I moved to Germany to work for a company called One and One, or a group within a group, United Internet. Where meanwhile I work as a head of IT security for the company called One and One Mail and Media Applications SE. You might have heard of some of the brands we have, like WebD, GMX, or Mail.com. If you have not, it's basically cloud business. Think Google made in Germany with similar services, so email, cloud storage, and similar things. Since something more than 5 years, I'm also active with OWASP. I started contributing to SAMM in 2015, and also in the same year, I created a project called Security Red, which meanwhile, we have 2 leaders and some more people active working on that. And if you like, you can follow me on Twitter while I'm not particularly active, I would say. We have roughly 21 attendees. And I will be really interested who you are. Unfortunately, the chat is not working, but I would just typed in the Q&A just these 4 bullet points. So I'll be interested, where are you actually based in? So is it morning for everyone, or are you doing a night shift, or similarly? What is your professional role? So are you security person? Are you a developer, admin, DevOps engineer, whatever? I'd be also interested in if you have already worked with SAMM before, or if you have any touch points. Let it be either with the version 1 dot something or the rather new version 2. And also, if there's anything specific you'd like to cover today in the 3 hours. And I would leave you now just like something like 1 or 2 minutes to type it in. So please use the Q&A feature for this. So we have a quality manager. Perfect. Oh, California. So really someone doing a night shift. That's amazing. Welcome. Defect manager, okay. Master student, that's perfect that you're interested. Product owner from Germany, so the same time zone as myself. So probably has been a rather early morning. AppSec engineer, architecture, having actually a current project to build a policy with SAMM. Oh, that's perfect. So hope you can use the information from today right away. Yes, hello, Mario. Mario is a colleague of myself. Happy that you made it. Developer moves to AppSec, new in manager role. So looking to improve the maturity. I think there might be quite something for you today. So we have 26 attendees as of now. I got 8 responses so far, so I will still give it, say, a minute or so. If you join later, please just use the Q&A feature to answer to these 4 points. Welcome, Ankit. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It would be really good to know what your background is and if you had anything to do with SAMM so far. Okay, yeah, Ali from Israel, IT security DevSecOps, and no experience with SAMM. Okay, perfect. So, hopefully new useful stuff for you. So far, we have people from Israel, from Europe, and from the US, as far as I've seen. We had a mix of roles, more people, slightly more people doing exec stuff. Yeah, anyway, if you're still typing, feel free to finish it. I will still consider it. YCP from India, super. So now we have also India. Thank you. Yeah, I would go security architect as a DLC consultant. That's perfect. So far, I haven't seen much experience with SAMM from the responses, so I will try to adjust about that. So far, also, I haven't seen any particular topics you'd like to cover or expectations, which is probably logical in case you haven't worked with SAMM before, so you're not really sure what to ask for. So I will try to give you rough overview today how to work with the project. Yeah, as of today, what's our plan for the 3 hours? It's kind of split in 4 parts. The first part will be rather theoretical. So I will do my best to give you an overview about SAMM, to explain how it works, how it could help you, and then I think we will need like 45 minutes, maybe a bit more for this part. Then the idea is that should be the focus of today, that you actually get your hands dirty, so you will be able to try out an assessment yourself. While you'll be doing assessment, I will be also happy to take any questions you might have, either with the Q&A functionality, or you can raise the hand and our hosts will allow you to speak, and you can talk directly. While be aware that this meeting is recorded, so I'm not sure if the recording will actually be published. Nevertheless, it's recording. So in case you're concerned about data privacy or something, maybe better use the Q&A feature. I think the assessment will take us roughly an hour, including short voluntary break, if you'd like to. And this will leave us with 1 hour for the last 2 points, where again, the most of it will be focused on creating a roadmap, so creating your own AppSec strategy. And we'll finish like with 15 minutes of some tips from the practice, how to make introduction of a maturity model success in your organization. If you have any questions, I'm monitoring the Q&A panel all the time, so feel free to use it. If it's something rather small, I would try to answer it immediately. If it's a bigger topic, I will leave out to the session where you'll be actually working, and I will have some more space to go through the questions. Also, I think regarding the expectation management for today, so this is basically a shortened version of a workshop, which usually takes 1 day. And the idea is also to have you to give you some hands-on experience. So we will not go into the topics themselves that much. How to do a threat model, or how to secure your build pipeline, or how to set up security incident management process, for instance. But we will be mostly talking about principles on how to actually use the model. Yeah, there's a question: are we covering any secure SDLC elements, secure coding, and best practices for devs? I would say only on a very high level, because there are lots of topics to talk about. So the idea is to give you an overview what the topics are, but not to go too much in detail about these, as we don't have time for that today. Good. So maybe let's first try to answer the question: why would actually you be interested in using a maturity model, and what is the issue it actually solves? And I think there are a few points to that one. The first one is that essentially everyone has been becoming a code. Not only the traditional applications, like in web applications, like we had them, like, or we've been having them actually since like last 20 or more years. But now you have code, you know, in cars, in IoT stuff, wherever else. And this means that with code, also vulnerabilities and security flaws come. At the same time, you have, as a security person, you have really a lot of stuff to deal with, a lot of complexity. So like different stacks, technology stacks, and frameworks, different architecture patterns, different development methodologies, and also you have a lot of stuff to pick from which is maybe the good part. So you have whichever measures like threat modeling, pen testing, architecture reviews. But the bad part is all of these applications, or most of these, are actually quite costly if you want to bring them to some level of excellence where they actually decrease the risks. And this also means that for whatever you want to achieve, you actually do need a business case. On the right side, you see the famous project management triangle. Quality, cost, and speed. And basically, you can typically choose two. And security is basically nothing else than one and maybe even quite small part of quality of that part. That means that you actually cannot have software of a good quality without a good security. But if you want to have such software or such product, then you need to decide which of these two other corners of the triangle you are willing more to sacrifice, or how to balance all these things. Also, I'm sure that at least 50% of people here in the call, we have meanwhile 35 attendees. That's great. Have seen these curves. The idea is that the later you discover a security issue, the more expensive it is. And this also without the things like the GDPR fines, for instance, which if you discover the security flaw in the last phase or in the production phase, where you actually suffer from an incident, you leak data, you need to pay quite a lot of money for that. Typically, even if you don't even consider these things, the costs are still pretty high, as you have some reputations issues. Maybe if you are able to discover the issue within the testing phase, for instance, so you save all of these, but nevertheless still you need to create a fix. You will find out that the fix might be breaking something, so you need to get to, let's say, working fix in a few iterations. So yeah, it's basically way cheaper to prevent security issues rather than to fix them, and that's of course the case for any bug you might be thinking of. What's also important to understand is that in case you prevent the issues, that doesn't still mean that the security comes for free. So there always will be costs in whichever phase you start caring of the issues, and it's just the relative ratio how successful your program will be. You will also find out, or the security people among us, or they probably notice at the same time, it's not quite economical to prevent all the issues. So this has been, I would say, the traditional security strategy to say prevent actually incidents from happening, and then not taking that much care of the other phases. But if you compare this, for instance, to the medieval ages where people were building castles, so if you would compare your product to a castle, maybe you could say, okay, you managed to build the walls that high so that no one gets over it. Nevertheless, nowadays castles, the walls, they have lot of doors and windows. They consist from a lot of supply chain components, which are actually not developed by yourself. So there often you don't even know how secure or how thick the wall is. And that's why there is a need for framework which actually guides your development efforts throughout the whole product life cycle. And in case you have seen the previous version, the OWASP SAMM 1 dot whatever, the last version was 5, you might have seen that basically the development lifecycle there, or the product lifecycle, stopped or ended with hand over to production, and that's not how the world works anymore. So the SAMM now covers the whole lifecycle from the very early design phase up until that application running in production. Yeah, and you kind of classify the activities. You actually have multiple ways how to classify the activities to proactive ones and to reactive ones. This is the slide shows, and that's one way how to do it, where you say, okay, before the actual damage is done, you consider this as a proactive one. The code is there, and you need to fix the bugs. You call it reactive. But you might also see other principles where they say, okay, reactive is whatever starting with the incidents you, for instance, suffer. I think we had one raised hand, if I saw correctly. Do we have a question? As of now, I don't see the raised hand anymore. Yeah, maybe it was just a false click or something. In case you have questions, of course, don't hesitate. Yeah. So also, when you say, okay, I kind of got a message, I have a lot of things to choose from, I want to organize them something, and you start looking for initiatives which will help you actually with finding out what are all the activities you can do, how to structure them, what is economical for your case. You will also find quite a lot of resources. So I would say that for the security people, the classical stuff is either the ISO 27K series, so either the original 2701, which you can also get certified according to, or you have also the 2734, which is focused more on application security. For the US folks here, NIST has a lot of stuff, but the challenge you will face is that there are really a lot of abstraction levels above you need to think of, and as I say, the framework you need to create. So I think these standards give you, let's say, very good round picture. What are the, let's say, pillars of your strategy? But typically, in most implementation projects, there is a really lot of legwork for you to even figure out how to implement these things. Then down here, you see an example of an SSDLC process, so Secure Software Development Lifecycle. In this case, the Microsoft SDL. This is the waterfall one. There is also one from Scrum. You also find some others, and these are very prescriptive, I would say. So these frameworks help you, say, really take a list of activities and to understand what to do now, when, and which in order. At the same time, this becomes an issue if you are working with a bigger company where actually you have a lot of teams working in different ways, even changing their development methodology every now and then, or improving it continuously so that it best matches the business. And that's which gets us in the middle of those two. So something was still kind of actionable and gives you, let's say, a list of activities, but at the same time give you some space for you to be able to employ these mechanisms in various development technologies with various business models, whatever else. And let's say on this level of granularity, you will find two projects you might use. The SAMM is one of them. There's the open source one. Then there is also one commercial one, BSIM. I would say the biggest difference between these two is that SAMM aims to be more prescriptive. So actually to tell you how to create a roadmap, how to assess your scope, how to get on the way, while the BSAM is rather the part of observation, so looking into what are the activities, what various companies are actually doing. And actually both SAM and BSIM had, let's say, a common father, I would say, and were some, let's say, more than 10 years ago structured in actually the same way. Yeah, so what is actually SAM? So here you see the official definition. SAM is a model which helps you first understand where you are as an organization in terms of various security practices we might do. It will help you then create expectations on your security program. So depending on your risk appetite, how far are you willing to go in terms of security? It also helps you to actually show what you have achieved with the budget you've got, and allows you to question that one. And also on the detail level, it actually helps you define all these activities on a rather specific level, I would say, so that you have, let's say, a toolbox which you can serve yourself from. I would say SAM works with 4 core ideas, or call it assumptions, or observations or principles. The first one is that every organization is changing throughout the time. So I think last year has been, say, a lot of lessons learned for a lot of organizations where these have been changing even faster than usually. But if you don't change as an organization and you don't develop, there you die at some point. So you want to typically have changes rather iterative. You want to have a goal you're aiming for, but you still want enough flexibility to be able to adjust that goal depending on how your business is developing. Also, the second part is that every organization is different, obviously, and different meaning with really lots of things are coming there. So different might mean the industry you're working in. So you might be working in a finance sector, or telco, or industry, or B2B, B2C markets. You might be working in a lot of regulated business with a lot of compliance requirements. You might not have almost any regulation relevant for you at all. You might be working in various ways how to deliver your products. You might be shipping software. If you think, for instance, of cars, where I know the updates, like the car comes into garage to be updated like once a year, or maybe not even that. Or you might be, let's say, working in a cloud business where you have multiple releases every day. You're working with different technologies, with different know-how of the people. You might be a local organization or a distributed one. The same goes for clients. So all organizations are specific, they have specific risks, and this means that a model which will serve you well needs to be aligned with your with the particular risks your organization is facing. Also, we believe that the guidance must be prescriptive, so should be clear enough for the people. Maybe if you're not security expert or have don't have a lot of experience for like last 10 or even more years, we believe that the market needs a solution which also smaller companies, for instance, without much security personnel can take and actually apply and can demonstrate improvements. Yeah, and last but not least, the measuring point is really important. So obviously there is no such thing like a perfectly secure software. Like you will always be working with trade-offs, and depending on who your enemy is, if you're facing script kiddies, that's fine. If you are facing governments, then that's where you get stuff. So as a security person, you kind of need a tool to show how well you are doing, and what the points to improve are, so to make all of it measurable. Also, don't forget that SAMM is a model, and that means that it is inherently wrong, as the famous British mathematician or statistics guy said. Nevertheless, definitely a SAMM aims to be helpful for sure and useful. Also, one thing or one common point of confusion is, let's say, in the terminology. Say, is it OpenSAMM or is it SAMM or OWASP SAMM, or how that works? Where it's actually, we are still called OpenSAMM a lot of times. So I think for that it's important to understand the history of the product. So it was actually created by Praver Chandra back in the 2000s, like 2007, 2009, where actually the first live release was done, and it was created as an OpenSAMM. And also Praver did an amazing work there. The model was very popular, was spread really quickly. There were many companies building consulting business by measuring companies into SAMM, helping them define a security strategy. So it was a big success, and also OWASP, Praver donated this project to OWASP. Then, unfortunately, between 2009 and 2015, nothing too much changed, and the project started to be not quite current. So, in case you had a chance to have a look at the OpenSAMM, the version 1.0, this is still pretty much the waterfall world. So working with silos, with gates, people handing over the product through various parts of the chain. So there was a need to modify it, and that's where the SAMM team got together and contributed to, let's say, the OpenSAMM version. And there was a question, okay, how does it go on? Because also say, and the original author of the model had some plans with that, but also there was a team wanting to, let's say, do more progress on that. So as in the OWASP forking actually the OpenSAM project and becoming OWASP SAMM instead of OpenSAM in 2016. Yeah, the SAM 1.1 contained some improvements, let's say some of the biggest, to close some biggest gaps, and the project had by then, let's say, to the more traditional development process. Then the next issue we've been seeing was, let's say, the measuring process, the assessment were actually quite difficult. So then came the OWASP SAMM version 1.5, the M2 to fix it. I will not go into details about that, but basically, the rough idea was originally you were given questions which you could answer either with yes or no, and in the real world, you end up very often with the answer like neither yes nor no. It's more like kind of. So SAMM 1.5 kind of fixed that, and last year, after 3 years of preparation, we actually managed to release the 2.0. First as a beta in 2019, and then the live version in just the beginning of this year. And this has been reworked to a high degree. So there are ways how to migrate from version 1 to version 2. But basically, with version 2, we did our best to consider all the possible practices and experience with the SAM we've seen in the last 10 years. There is a question, does the new version contain DevSecOps pipeline as well? I would say it considers the whole DevOps and DevSecOps movement. That's for sure. That's been one of the major changes where you would have really quite tough time to map 1.something version to really strong DevOps culture. So there have been some differences, and there are also some practices covering that. Yeah, just to give you an idea, who is currently on the SAM core team. So as you see, we have people from the whole world working in all kinds of companies. We have 2 leaders, both based in Belgium, so Seba and Bart, also quite known in the community. And I'll say that's one of the part which makes SAM quite a lot of fun, actually preparing the model and being able to see what the whole world is doing. So it's like we would reflect the reality only in the Silicon Valley or whatever else on the world. This is really a global project trying to bring the experience from all possible industries and geographical locations. And this actually brings us to the model. This is how it looks, and don't be afraid. I will explain it step by step. So basically, on the highest level, SAM consists of 5 so-called business functions. If you have a look at them, this might still kind of remind you of a waterfall. So the idea, okay, you have some governance, some, let's say, preparation framework to be actually able to do this, to know the rules and so on, have security policies. Then you have a software, so you go into design phase where you see, okay, what it should be doing. Then you actually start coding, then you see how it works, what you've coded, and then you move to operations. And while SAM 2 still works with waterfall, just showing the business function like that doesn't mean that they really happen in this order. So for instance, here in the verification phase, you have architecture analysis. So meaning something you actually do typically within the design phase. And let it be, while you can have either design phase in a waterfall project, or you have obviously very lightweight design phase for a feature or for a release. So the way how to think about that is that the business functions are rather orthogonal and, let's say, complement each other independently on the particular development methodology, for instance, you're working with. Then every business functions contains 3 security practices. So on the rough level, these are, let's say, the 3 topics to be concerned about, and we'll get more into details about them just in a moment. And the questions, this lifecycle can be easily applied in agile methodologies, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. That it should not depend too much on which methodology you're using. So, for instance, SAMM version 1, you had a lot of formulations like, okay, make sure that you do a pen test before every major release. And that's obviously nothing what would work with more, let's say, agile developments, or even like things like DevOps or DevSecOps or biz DevSecOps, or however you call it, and whatever the fancy words are. So indeed, it definitely aims to be universal. And if you're specifically is an agile, maybe also one thing to say also right away is that SAMM also offers guidance or various guidances, and there is also on the website of SAMM you will find a specific guidance for agile setups. So what are the best practices from the market, how to, let's say, I know, improve your build process or whatever else you might think of. Yeah, so we were talking about the security practices, and every security practice divides into 2 streams. So for instance, if you're talking about strategy and metrics, and then one part of the thing is the definition, and the second part is the measurement. So here you see the particular streams. This, for instance, also a thing which was not present in the version 1. And here you have actually, so that went too fast. Here you have actually the particular activities which are then defined in quite a lot of details, and we will not go into detail, but you can easily read it on the website and go through the model, say what are the particular steps to do. Within every practice, you can reach various maturity models. Or maturity levels, sorry. So I said the implicit one is 0. This means that you haven't done anything. So I know, let's take an easy example. If you take the education and guidance, so on level 1 or level 0, you basically are not providing any security trainings for your staff. On level 1, you made the explicit and started doing something consciously. So maybe you started up with some, let's say, awareness training for the developers or for your staff, so that I know people know, okay, what cross-site scripting is or whatever, or who is the where do they find the people to help if they face a security incident or similar. And the level 2 typically gets more structured and repeatable and also defined. So with trainings, maybe you said, okay, it maybe does not make too much sense to give every role you have in your process exactly the same training. So maybe you kind of adapt the training depending on whether you're talking to a product manager, to a Linux box administrator, or to a developer, or to a manager. And level 3 means that you are also able to scale, and also there is a lot of enforcement coming to that. So maybe on level 3 you have exact overview who has attended which trainings, and maybe you don't even allow people to touch production code until they get the relevant trainings for them. And this is an example how it works. Here we have the security testing part, where we would say you have 3 maturity models. On the first one, you want to actually start doing some security testing. Second, you want to have a repeatable process. On the third level, you want to have, let's say, master and scale, and some high degree of assurance that you are doing the practice really well and you are improving all the times. And within these theme streams, you have the activities which actually to do where SAM considers that you have reached the level 1 or the further one. And yeah, we'll get into the topics right in the minute. Yeah, in the next part, I will give you a short overview of all the business functions and all the security practices. I will just really skim through that. As I said, the idea is to give you an idea what these practices are about, so that you are kind of able to, let's say, get your hands dirty in the next part. So don't expect too much details. Nevertheless, questions are welcome, and I will try to answer them as we go to the assessment phase. So, if we talk about governance, the strategy and metrics, once you want to define the metrics and you want to also measure and ensure you improve your security strategy. So here, let's say, while defining the metrics, here you're aiming to actually understand what your security posture is as a company, and it's kind of defined and clear to everyone on the level 3. You want to make sure that your product security program or AppSec program is really aligned with business and continues to align as your business develops, so you don't have the mismatch there. With the measurement part, the key, you want to start defining what are the very basic metrics, like amount of findings or kind of their criticality or amount of incidents to understand where you are. On the level 3, you want to have really good feedback loop and to make sure that your strategy is based on data-driven decisions. Second, security practice is policy and compliance, which consists of policy and compliance stuff. So policy being the internal drivers, compliance the external part. While on level 1, you want to have some, let's say, basic rules of engagement of everyone. On the level 3, you actually measure how you are compliant to various policies you have, while obviously improving also the policies all the time and creating a flow of actions, and maybe even have things like policy and code and similar, so have a lot of automated process. For the compliance part, so for the external, it's more about on the first level, you at least understand, okay, what are drivers? Is it like law? If so, which parts of legislations are the relevant for you or most relevant for you? Do you have particular regulations in your industry, like I know for the US folks, like HIPAA, or I know PCI DSS in the payment industry, and so on. And also can be some, let's say, particular certifications, like for instance the ISO we mentioned. And so on the level, while on the level first, you kind of understand, okay, so what you are dealing with. On the level 3, you again are able to measure where are you not compliant to those requirements, and to which degree, and you also ensure that you are able to detect say any kind of incompetence really fast. The last part of the governance business functions is education and guidance, which splits into explicit training, and the second part is building a culture. So I think the training I would quite mention. You start with some, let's say, awareness trainings, which are kind of defined. Okay, what does it mean? Starting when SAM considers it an awareness training. On level 3, you want to have standardized security program with roles assigned to trainings, ensuring that, for instance, people who have not trained do not code, or only code with supervision or similar. And with a culture, the culture focuses on a scale of security. So it's not like, I know, typically like in a company you have lots of developers and a very few security people dedicated, and especially in agile environments, those few security people don't keep up with everything what's happening. So it's basically making everyone think about security, making topic, and say it describes the way how to get there, from actually at least pointing out to people and saying, okay, now you're maybe responsible for being the first point of consultancy for a certain team or topic or whatever, throughout having a lively security community working together on continuous improvement. Then we move to the design phase. Just give me a second, please. So the design business functions again consists of three practices. Threat assessment splits into understanding the risk profile of the application. So, for instance, in the first phase, having some easy security questionnaire, answering a few questions, enable you to classify the application somehow, at least very roughly. If you master this stream, you are actually able to continuously evaluate the risk profile of the application and automatically detect any changes to that, and also react to these changes. With threat modeling on the level 1, you start doing something. Let's say start discovering the biggest architecture flaws, while on the third level you have well-defined threat modeling methodology for different types of applications, making threat modeling more repeatable and also more reliable, and also ensuring that also the threat modeling methodology improves again all the time. Next part is our security requirements, which are split into your internal requirements on your own software and how you manage the external world. And again, for the security requirements for the internal ones, on the first level, you say have some kind of, you have started defining some security requirements. So the security requirements became a topic at all, like besides all the functional and non-functional requirements, which I know you are probably familiar with. Up until on level 3, you have well-defined security requirements framework, which helps you to understand for which type of applications with which risk profile you are supposed to use or to fulfill which requirements. You understand immediately which requirements you are not compliant with. You continue to develop the requirements. So there's one common issue is, I know you start developing an application in 2015 or whatever, and in 2020 you are still developing that application against requirements from 2015, but the requirements also develop with that time. So there are parameters like this to consider. With the supplier security, you start on the first level, okay, giving some questions to your vendors, at least to understand, okay, how you're doing and where your biggest risks are. While on the level 3, you are more well aligned with the suppliers. You might want to actually use the same, for instance, build infrastructure or similar to be able to react faster to security issues or similar. Maybe also one thing which is quite important and which I haven't actually noticed yet is that you are not always aiming on the levels at level 3. So maybe it might not make sense for you simply to go that far in your particular situation. So this is also always something to consider, where you say, okay, like a security person, you would like to have everything perfect, everything well aligned, but if you don't have a business case for that, it doesn't make too much sense. So you might say, okay, I know with the supplier security, for instance, if you say it's for you perfectly fine to stay on the first or second level, where you say make the shared responsibility model really explicit and monitor it, and that's what makes sense for you. That's perfectly fine. They will say, okay, it does make sense for you to go for higher for that, to invest more than that, because obviously, if we talk again the project management triangle, it will either make you slower or it will make your development more expensive. Yeah, security architecture, it kind of again splits between the design activities. So do you have some things actually to work with, like with, for instance, level 1, how easy or difficult have you made it to your development teams to create a secure architecture? So do they have at least some, let's say, rules of the thumb to go for, or some principles on the level 3? You want to have reference topics for them, so they know, okay, if I'm building a cloud app, this is the SSO I'm using, this is the DOS protection I'm using, this is the log infrastructure I'm using. Everything is prepared, and it helps me to focus on the business model only. On the technology management side, so again, how well do you manage your technology stack? So is it like every development team you have has like whichever technology stack they want to use, and that's pretty fine? Or do you actually want to enforce the use of some particular technologies where you say, okay, like everyone here works with, I know, Ruby on Rails, the following frameworks, and that's it. And obviously there is some cost to that. This brings us to the implementation business function, starting with secure build, which splits into how you build the software and how you manage your dependencies, which you typically pull during the build. So with the build process, starting with something what is actually repeatable, where you mitigate the risk of human errors at least to let's say significant level, up until making sure that you have well-defined baseline, and whatever doesn't match the baseline either doesn't get built, or you have, for instance, sign off for like clear stakeholder and the risk owner who, let's say, signs the override of these rules, and you monitor them and take actions on these. For the dependency part, again, starts with understanding where you are, what you are actually relying on, all the way through actually handling all those dependencies as your own code. So I know if you do security, I know, code review for your own code, then basically you handle your dependencies in the pretty much same way. I would say still this is think a lot of companies struggle with. Typically most companies are, let's say, more mature with handling their own code, rather than, let's say, having some, say, well-defined procedures for dependencies. And that's a big issue, obviously, as I know statistically. I think today, like, only about 10% of the code which the product consists of is actually your code, and the 90% is stuff you just pull from dependencies on average. Yeah, once you've built the software, you also need to deploy it securely. Again, split into the deployment process and pipeline itself. So making sure that the pipeline which deploys your products is also nothing else than a software actually, and needs to be secured appropriately. And the secret management part, which is also a big challenge for a lot of organizations. So, and then the deployment process works a bit similar to the build process. So starting with something what's at least repeatable, at least clearly defined, limiting the human error, up until making really sure that whatever you deployed is exactly the same thing which you took from somewhere else. Also, if you have a look at the website or in the PDF document, you will find out that this is just, all these things are one sentence summary of like such long application with actually quite a lot of activity. So this is, let's say, the most interesting part for that. But of course, there are, let's say, more things to do that. So then on the level 3 here, you have, let's say, very solid state of security of your deployment pipeline, for instance. Yeah, with the secret management, you start kind of with making sure that not every single member of your organization has access to your production passwords, like database passwords and similar, all the way through injecting the secrets in the real time, changing them regularly, having a lot of automated processes, which basically limit the risk of the leakage. And also the level 3 comes with, let's say, high level of security that whenever your production secret leaks, not only outside, but actually breaches your defined policy, you actually get to know really fast. Last part of the implementation business practice is defect management, which classifies or splits into how good you are with tracking the defects and how good you are in reacting on them. And in the first level, while at least you have kind of some central place where you can understand, okay, which your products have which vulnerabilities. On level 3, you go all the way through making sure that all this information is really comparable and standardized, for instance, with classification of the security defects, and also having, for instance, SLAs for fixing these. So unless you don't fix security-related defect within a certain period of time, something happens. Either the application is switched off, or there are some escalations procedures or similar. Yeah, with the second part, you want to understand like what kinds of defects you are, so that at least I know if you see like, okay, you have 20 SQ injections, maybe it's good thing to follow up on them and maybe to create a training or whatever. So let's say focusing on really obvious quick wins based on the data you have in the defects, all the way through actually enhancing your strategy based on the defected data, and see what's working, what's not efficient anymore, where you should move, and so on. Okay, the fourth function is the verification one. Again, starting with architecture assessment. Excuse me. So again, it splits into, let's say, validating how your architecture, the security relevant aspects are working. So at least starting with some, say, best effort assessment all the way through actually measuring how well the particle components are working and fulfilling their goal and reacting on them, obviously. And for the mitigations, want to see, okay, you want to assess against typical security threats. Again, the obvious one with some best effort principle. While on the third level, again, is the more the reactive part. Say how you let's say leverage all the data you've gathered on the previous level, and how far you're willing to go into strategic decisions on that part. For say the testing, then say there are one thing how to think about testing is say how well you actually comply with the requirements, assuming of course that you have requirements. And here we have two streams. One is, okay, the requirements which you have designed, actually are you testing for them? So I know if you said in the beginning that you want to do input validation, what are you really doing that? If so, in say which degree of automation, reliability, and so on. While here on the right part, you're rather looking for, okay, what are the requirements you actually missed? So starting with some, I know, fast testing to see, okay, which requirements you actually forgot, and maybe which you should add up until, for instance, even things like denial of service attacks testing. Then second, say another way how to think of security testing is you want to have kind of both scalable baseline, which is really important. The faster you go. So ensure that I know you do something with every build and in which quality. Do you just take something like OWASP SAMM and like let it run in in every build, or let's say every day, or whatever makes sense for your environment, up until again having all these testing tools on the right places in the delivery pipeline or CI/CD pipeline, and say also take consequences like breaking builds or whatever, and having these tests also, let's say, customized to the particular products. Second part is a more traditional one, I would say. So we talk about things like penetration testing, where you say, okay, at least you start testing something somehow with the best effort. You have an idea, okay, why to test one application rather than the other one, all the way through having clearly defined process when you test what, getting a higher level of assurance. And this brings us to the operations business function. So again, if you are new to SAMM 2 but have some experience with SAMM 1, so that here we have really a lot of changes and basically done from scratch, and basically a whole new concept. And first part of operations is how well you deal with incidents, and this kind of breaks how well you are actually in detecting them. So I know, do you realize you had an incident like 1 year later, like as you see a lot of in the press, or do you realize it real time or near real time? How reliably? So let's say starting with someone explicitly at least looking for like for typical stuff, or let's say grabbing logs for funny things, up until to having a high level of automation. Second part is how good you are in responding to these. So on the level 1, do you have at least kind of plan who's responsible for what, or will you be running around like headless chicken mode, trying to figure out what are the steps to do? Up until really ensuring that like whichever incidents you have, also in geographic stuff, in whichever location you might have, even if you might have, for instance, one dedicated incident security team, response team in one location, that you are able to react to security incidents quite independently of like day or time or locations or the time of the incidents. Next, security practice is about how well you take care of your environment. So this is split into hardening, so having, let's say, the default configuration, and say is tightening it up, given that obviously most frameworks and technology components and similar come with default settings, which allow it to get up and running very, very quickly. So it's not hardened. So starting explicitly doing something for this through having clear defined baselines for various parts of components, up until to actually detecting automatically breaches to your hardening policies. And similar with patching, updating. So maybe at the level 1, you understand, okay, what you rank on and what the most obvious issues are, up until maybe on level 3, you don't necessarily wait for the known CVE, but you react proactively. You understand where you are not patched. You take follow-up actions on that, and you improve all the time. And operational management is the last part of the operations function. So we are almost through with this overview. One part is how well you understand which data are you processing. Do you have policies for data processing, and are actually enforcing the policies, or do you understand where the data policy is breached? So I know, do you for whichever data you might be processing, do you have overview of what you are processing where? Here, data breaches is not that much about the classical data breach, like I know a hacker comes into your infrastructure and steals some data and publishes it on paste bin or similar, but rather data policy breaches. So I know if you said that, for instance, I don't know, whichever the confidentiality levels you might have, for instance, like confidential, secret, top secret, whatever. If data shows somewhere what is not regulated by policy, you are able to realize this really quickly. And second part is how well are you doing with actually switching off stuff. And that's also challenge for a lot of organizations. So I know if you had similar experience, but I know sometimes you run or you realize you actually still run a server or a product you actually don't need, or some, let's say, architecture components which nobody is using, and it's just running there, collecting dust and CVEs and so on. So, and again, this activity starts with, I know, explicitly looking for these forgotten parts of your infrastructure, up until really understanding and really having every single part well documented with very clear lifecycle state, and having clear processes, for instance, decommissioning of applications, meaning, I know, example, firewall rules don't stay open if you don't need them anymore, and similar. Good. That was a really quick run through. We are almost in the time. I needed like something over 15 minutes for that, but we are still doing well. And now the idea is that you can try to perform an assessment yourself. And how to do that? The preferred way is if you can download the SAMM toolbox, which is basically Excel file. If you have Excel on your computer, this is also the one which I will be using, because it's the most, I would say, in the community, most used tool, and also most advanced one. In case you say, okay, you don't have Excel or the similar parser, you can use the online version. The SAMM toolbox is, I cannot write into chat, but I will show you how to find it more easily. So if you go to this website, so owaspsamm.org, and you click here on SAMM assessment. Then here you will find a toolbox spreadsheet. And if you click on this link, it will take you up to the Git repository when you can download this this Excel file. So while you're on it, like if you have any troubles or you miss something, just use the Q&A function or raise your hand, please. To repeat something while you're downloading it, I will go through some very basic information about assessment. So again, just to revisit the maturity levels, basically always what you're looking for in the maturity levels is 0, you don't do anything. 1, you explicitly started doing something and you have kind of an idea what you are doing. On the second level, you have a repeatable and clear defined process. And on level 3, you are enforcing this process, detecting all the breaches and improving all the time. And then for every questions you will have, every question you will get, you will have 4 possibilities how to respond that. So the first one is always no, or not at all. So I know if we again take the example with the training. So are you giving awareness training to your employees? So you would say, okay, no, I'm not. Second option is to say, okay, I'm giving it to some of the employees. 5 is at least half, or in similar sense. And for the 1, you say, okay, everyone has been trained for this part. These options are a lot of times formulated differently according to whether you speak about your staff, for instance, about your products, about T11 number of teams. So you will see that in the Excel file. Also, what before we start, important to understand is you have various ways how to actually do the assessment. So we talk either lightweight or deep dive, lightweight, you either do it yourself or you give the questionnaire to everyone and get responses and do an average of all these responses or something similar. So the goal is, for instance, within an hour or so to have, let's say, get at least rough idea how you might be doing. You can, of course, go deep dive, which means you say, okay, like you are looking for evidence material. So say, okay, you have this defined process. Show me the process. Show me that you are living this process and that it actually works, fulfills all the quality criteria, and so on. This is obviously way bigger project for that, which will take you probably couple of days at least. Also, things to consider is you can do it yourself, which is perfectly fine if you're able to understand that activities to a certain degree. If you are not so much interested in comparison with the industry, for instance, or you might want to get a professional help from a company which has already seen and assessed a few companies, I can do SAMM and can give you some guidance for the assessment. During the assessment, there are two things to consider. One is the coverage. This is something what you typically ask for. So I know how many of your employees have you trained. So it's not like, I know you would be asked, okay, do you give trainings to employees? Yes or no? This is kind of difficult to answer. And second part is the quality, and quality is expressed in the means of mandatory criteria which you need to fulfill. So again, example could be if you say, do you give an awareness training to your employees? You could say, yes, I do, because I know I downloaded this YouTube video where some guy is talking something about security, and I show it to all companies on their first day, to all the employees on the first day. And that would not qualify as a training from the SAMM perspective. So here, it's not a screenshot from the Excel file where every question comes with, let's say, mandatory quality criteria, which tells you, okay, if you have a question, then if you, let's say, comply with these points, then you are doing fine, unless you have still some work to do to reach the maturity level. Here you see the maturity level, always 1, 2, 3. So this is how it works. Here we are talking about the security testing, so about the security control testing. So how the score is counted, you take the average of both streams. So let's say the idea is that for being on the first level with the requirement-based testing, then you need to fulfill these activities, for instance, to have it on one. Also, what you see here is something what you actually should see quite commonly, is that, for instance, while the very basic measures you have for, let's say, all the applications or most of them, as you go up the scale to the second and third level, you have less coverage or even zero coverage, simply because it typically doesn't make sense to start with biggest rocket science and only afterwards start with the basics. And if you actually run into such cases, this might be a reason to think twice. Like, are you really sure you know what you're doing, or would you maybe want to improve the quality on the first level, where you get more for less resources? Within assessments, you will fight with a lot of topics which will make your assessments difficult. Basically, you will say always, yes, like we have some teams which do this practice to some level, but again, like some teams do not quite qualify for all the quality criteria. Some are even better than this, so that will be one part. Again, mapping it to all the technology you might be using, that might be either easy or very difficult job for you, depending on, I know, how centralized or decentralized your organization is. Sometimes also various parts of the organizations, if they work in silos, they might have different, let's say, view on these things. So that might lead to a lot of, let's say, discussions and unclarity on that. And also depending how, if you have all your developers internally, if you work with like concepts like stuff on demand or like even like externalize a lot of stuff, this might also pose a challenge for you. As for today, for the tryout, I would say choose a scope of let's say for the audit you would like to perform. I would suggest to start with something which is rather small, because that will be easier for you. So it's typically like if you have, I know, depending again how your organization is structured, I know either one product or one team or whatever makes sense, rather than, for instance, division with 20 teams or even the whole company with, I know, hundreds of products. So the smaller will be easier. And also, it will be easier for you, given that we don't have that much time today, and we're strictly time boxed. Pick something what you're actually familiar with as much as possible. Also for today, the idea is, again, no one expects that you will be able to do a perfect assessment today. So the idea is that you rather see how the model works. So don't take the questions too literally. Just, I know, time box the question, say, okay, whatever your gut feeling says, that's fine. The idea is to explore the model, not, let's say, to do as assessment. The assessment you can do afterwards when you have more time for that. And also to get more familiar with the model, start with a function that you are internally working in. So we had some people with background in development, or so maybe start with the implementation function or design function. Do not start with governance. Again, if you're, let's say, IT security consultant, focus on governance, then do start with governance, because that will help you get started with the principle of the model and then make it easier for you. And that will be it. We could start now. So in case you have downloaded and opened the file, in case you have some issues, again, please shout in the Q&A feature, so that I can react. Otherwise, I assume that everyone has either the Excel file open or at least the website. I'm using the Excel file, and there are 4, say, cards with some stuff, and we will start with the interview part. And basically, your goal is, now we have here 90 questions. The your goal is now to answer all the questions according to best practice. So what you think is the right here. Use the quality criteria to guide you. Don't take it too literally. If there is some minor thing, just enter whatever. The idea is that you get some, let's say, kind of results. So you can run through that, and for the time while you're filling the table, the questions, I will stop sharing. I will be taking whichever questions you might have. So if you want to do a short break or anything, feel free. And the idea is that in 45 minutes, we will continue with the roadmap part. In case you get done earlier, post me a message or whatever. If I see, okay, like 90% of people are done, then we can also take ourselves more time for creating the roadmap or similar. So yeah. Have fun with the assessment, and as I said, whichever questions you might have are welcome. I'll be here looking at the Q&A box or looking if someone is raising hand. So right now you are 15 minutes into the assessment. So optimally you should be like 30 questions through with the assessment. In case you're faster or slower or have any feedback, don't hesitate to use the Q&A session. So for the moment, we have only question from someone who obviously come later when the session starts. So we started 1 hour and 45 minutes ago. So we are well over the half, and the participants are now doing the assessments using the SAMM spreadsheet. Also, maybe just to add, if you're slower than expected, so you don't manage to go through the questions that fast, that's not that much of a problem. The idea is just to get, let's say, some decent amount of representative data. So in case you end up with, for instance, 2/3 of the questions filled up, that's fine for the training purposes. So we are now half an hour into the assessment. So you still have 15 minutes left. In case you get ready faster, then feel free to take a break. We will restart the session in 10:15 or 11:15 Israel time. In case you need more time than that, what would be helpful is if you manage to finish, for instance, one or two or more full business functions so that you get some representative data. So for instance, if you're not familiar with operations at the time, it's fine if you keep the, let's say, for RESTful ones or even less. The idea is to, let's say, gather enough to the next part. And of course, still the offer, whichever questions you might have, I'm here, so feel free to raise your hand or use the Q&A feature. You still have 5 minutes left. So if you're on somewhere on the way, try to finish the particular either security practice or business function. And we will restart in 10:15 in 5 minutes. So you have last minute. So I started my video again. So please finalize whichever question you're currently up to? There have been no questions in the Q&A, so not sure if everything is crystal clear or if you're just afraid or whichever. In case you're not sure, again we will have another option to ask questions during the roomlet phase. Yeah, it's 10:15, so I suggest that we go on. So as for the assessment, I hope it was not too frustrating practice. So if you're doing it for the first time, there is some learning curve. I filled up the responses in the Excel file myself with some, let's say, rather random data. And now if you switch to the scorecard tab, then you should see, depending on how much you have filled out, something like this. Most common thing would be that, in a perfect world, this would be quite round. I don't think that will be the case with most organizations. You have some overview on how you rank in general. So here, for instance, I will be doing the best with governance, and with the verification, I would have the way most to go. I think with a lot of organizations, that's exactly the opposite case. So I know, coming from the mindset, okay, before we put something live, we pen test it. The verification stuff actually quite further, and governance not that much. Also depends on the industry you're in. And here you can also develop some feeling about how homogeneous you are doing within one practice. So for instance, here within the governance, I'm pretty good with training, but I'm really bad with policies, or not so mature, let's put it that way. While at the same time, for the implementation function, this is quite round. Also, what you might see if you do a real approach, typically here you would have more colors than here in the last column. Now in the process, you know where you are, and what do you do with that information. So you have few options. The first option is that you realize that where you are, and that's exactly where you want to be. In that case, congratulations, you're done, and you can log off and go take a break. This will, however, not be the case with the most assessments. You actually will find out that it will be sensible to perform better, at least with some security practices. And now we'll be talking about how to get there in an interactive way. Again, I think what's important to mention, depending who you are, if you're a security person, you would be willing to have level 3 in all cases. However, this mightn't be, or even probably won't be, quite aligned with the risk profile of your organization. So while it might make sense to get to the highest level with some practices, or even beyond, which is of course possible as well, with some of them you say, okay, doesn't make too much sense for me. Level 1 is perfectly fine. So this needs to be really aligned. Also, with don't forget that while some activities are quite standalone and to be used alone, like I don't think patch management, for instance, some activities have dependencies between them. So I know we were, for instance, talking about, say, having security requirements within one business function, and then testing against these security requirements. So when you improve, it might make sense to to increase both levels, let's say, kind of synchronously in such case. Another point to consider is while you might not be doing that well job in a security initiative, you might be able to use some company-wide initiatives really easily. So maybe you are not that far with security trainings, but your enterprise offers really great e-learning platform, offers as a service, maybe creating of training content or something similar. So the idea is that, especially in the beginning, in order to sell the program, you want to be looking for quick wins, which you can sell, and you can convince people that this is actually something what is working and where it also makes sense to do investments on the longer run. This is how an staged roadmap might look like. So what SAMM offers by default are 4 stages. Here you see where you are currently right now. Here is where you want to be in a reasonable time period. Again, this might be 2 years, this might be 1 year, this might be whatever. You can also add or remove phases as you see fit. You also see here the level of improvement. You do within each phases. The recommendation would be to make the phases at least equally long. So if you say, okay, your phase is 1 month, if you're very agile, or half a year, then do all the other phases same long. And now we will try it out. And how it would work is we would define a reasonable target state, and then we would split the progress. In a time constraint, I would suggest that try to pick 1 business functions, and I will show you how to do it. So here is back my Excel table with my results, and now I can switch to the roadmap state. And what you see here by default, here you have the initial state in the F column, and then what you see here afterwards are the particular phases with the questions. The first step would be to only leave the current state and the last phase, phase 4. So what you can do, in a sense, in order to make it a bit easier, you can mark those columns. And you can hide them. And let's say I will do this exercise for the government function for the first one. So let's say currently, do I understand the enterprise-wide risk for my applications? This is where I am now, and this is where I want to get in the target state. You could, in theory, say, okay, you are doing too well. It's not economical, so you could go down. In that case, this target state will become red. Most typically, this will not be the case. So the idea is to get this for 1 business function. Once you're done, so I will improve here on certain things. So now once you're done with all the 18 questions of 1 business function, then you can again unhide the progress. Let me think what's. So here we go. And now your goal is to define the journey there. So you can say, for instance, if you have here 0.5, and in the end you have still missing one column. And you have one, so maybe it might make sense to go from one step to the other, or you might want to send, okay, you will do it kind of iteratively. So you will split the progress. So here, actually, here it's not. work. So here you have better example. So here you might be iteratively, and always when you do the step, you will see the level green. So again, the idea is to let's try to do it in 20 minutes for one business function. So for this means for 18 questions. In the first place, define where you would want to be. And then in the, let's say, second 10 minutes, try to define a path, somehow how to get there. And again, if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask. I will keep sharing this time, and I will say do the same thing for also for the one business function. Okay, we have the question, what is the role of phase 1, 2, 3 if they don't change? Well, if you find out that you are able to do the changes between your current state and your target state in one hop, then indeed there is no role of them. Or in opposite case, you might actually not need 1 to 3 phases, but 1 to 15 or whatever. The goal is to not to do everything at once, but rather to focus on particular activities. So let's say in phase 1, you would increase, for instance, improve 1/3 of the actual workload in the second phase again, and so on. I hope that answers the question. If not, feel free to ask again or ask for unmute. So as you see, I filled the target state here right now for 2 business functions, just to have more data, to have something to show. If you want to do it just for one, that's perfectly fine. So you can just stay here in this corner or with whichever business functions you picked. So you have 10 more minutes. I said the goal is to see if you can manage just one business function and to define the steps within the particular phases. I'm push to see even maybe if at all the steps make sense to you. Questions are welcome. Otherwise, we'll continue with the theory in 10 minutes. So this means quarter to 12 Israel time. Yes, Konstantinos, I have just noticed as well. So I'm correcting it manually. I will take it with me and let the colleagues know how to or improve the Excel myself. Obviously, there is some problem with the implementation function. Yes, Konstantinos, you're right. The phase 3 has different drop downs as well, while if you fill the phase 2 from that part on that point, for me, it works correctly again as well. So it looks like there is some issue with the formulas there, which we'll have a look at and correct. So we have 2 minutes now. So please finish whatever you are working on right now, and we'll restart in quarter to 12. So just 1 minute. Okay, it's 45, so let's pick up on the last mile. So I did the update for the two business functions. Indeed, I found out there is some issue with the Excel as the numbers are not propagated that well. So thanks for that hint. Obviously, so far everyone just corrected it without reporting it when doing the assessments. Now, what you might have experienced is that it might have been either easy for you to define a target state and then define iterations, or you might have preferred the way when you simply always define the next step and leave the target open. That's entirely according to you, your culture, your environment, and so on, what works better for you. So both are pretty valid options. And at the same time, as we said, with having less or more phases into improvement. What you might see now is in the last chart, some kind of roadmap with the improvement. Here you see the velocity. So this should be kind of equal because this describes how much effort it will probably cost you. So if you have too much velocity just on one phase, like I know 50 or 60% out of 4, then you might not be able to manage it, or you really need to count with explicit and with a lot of effort for that. And here you have also a graph showing how much we improve. So for instance, for me, the issue was that the policy on compliance, I was really weak in the beginning. So this is what I wanted to invest a lot in. Otherwise, the things that I were doing quite well already, these stayed rather flat, as I didn't need necessity to improve that much. So feel free to play around with that. And let's get to some final slides. How to make this thing success, or how to successfully implement SAMM in your organization. So I already mentioned it even a few times, I think, and I can mention enough. It starts with business case. Basically, for this, you want to get management buy-in because it will cost you resources, and management kind of need to plan those resources. So that's why it's important to understand what will it actually bring you as an organization to increase the maturity. Here are some typical arguments you might be using. So again, depending on your profile, is maybe compliance is really important for you. Maybe reputation for your customers is really important. So these are some points you might use. Also, I think if you're more agile organization, I think it's important to demonstrate added value rather quickly than to get buy-in for something where you might get a return in 2 years or similar. So for the first phase, or for the assessment and the first actions, look for the spots where you can actually achieve some quick wins. Maybe even in your history, you see things which simply have worked already, or again, you can leverage data, like I know you have incidents of a certain type, or similar organizations in your industry are suffering regularly from some kind of data breaches or attacks. So I think showing some improvement rather fast is really something that's important and will help you. Also, especially if you're working with a larger organization, I think what's really critical is to categorize your applications. So in most setups, not every single app will be exactly the same important as the other one. So this, if you manage to go that way, this will allow to create a risk-based decisions, which I think in larger organizations are basically essential. because otherwise, if you say you will secure everything exactly with the same level and same effort, then basically you will end up with your most critical systems secured exactly the same way as your biggest one, which doesn't make too much sense from the economical perspective. Also, keep the bell ringing. I think that's transparency is really important. Having on board to report regularly on the achievements. Thing which might work for you is the dedicated portal with either pull or push setup. So either you enable people to get informed about the progress of your initiative, or you inform them regularly, and also regular update towards management is, I think, really important to convince them that the buy-in that goes in the right direction, and be able to have the project on the ice rather than getting forgotten and getting into prioritization issues and conflicts with other initiatives you might have. We didn't talk about this topic almost at all today, but don't forget that OWASP has lots of projects which can help you on the way. A lot of them deliver amazing value for exactly zero costs, and so a lot of them are pretty equal or almost equal to commercial products, and also a lot of these projects will also help you to get even to level 3 in various security practices. So I know I think you might be familiar with one, but things like, for instance, OWASP SAMM, which allows you automate the security testing, has great APIs, especially for your delivery and CI/CD pipelines. Things like Dependency Direct, which delivers great value, and so on and so on. There is a huge choice. So have a look at these things, how they can support your initiative while not exploding your budget. Also, one thing which sometimes, especially management, likes to ask is, okay, so I'm planning to invest that much. How much do the others invest? So similar companies in my either geographical area or industry or of size or something similar. That's something what we are currently as a team working on. So the idea is to get some data from real world assessments from enterprises who are willing to share these. If this might be an option for you, please have a look at this address. So our homepage / benchmarking, or you will find also a link right on the homepage. Basically, you can choose from various levels of either verified or unverified contributions. So you can either choose to be pretty transparent about your level. So I know if you know some other initiatives, like for instance the ones of Cloud Security Alliance or similar, where also companies say put their name and these are the results. This is how we are doing. This you can see a lot, especially in a B2B business being done. You can be fully anonymous but still verified, or you can just even decide to contribute any real world data completely anonymously, and that would really help to also offer this anonymized and at least anonymized information to the others. So in case you are willing to share or you're interested in more details, have a look at the site or contact a colleague of our core team, Brian Glass, who is driving this initiative. And we hope to be able to offer some real world data also to SAMM consumers as well. And the last point would be, okay, get involved. There is a community. So either I would say the most lively channel is the OWASP Project SAMM Slack channel. So there a lot of people are asking questions, how to do certain stuff, give some feedback, or just chat. So this is a good place to start. Also, feel free to go to GitHub, file issues, whatever you will find out. Basically, the core team is meeting every two weeks, looking at what's going on and prioritizing the next events. Of course, if you say SAM is awesome and it really delivers value, also consider giving something back, either with resources like time or bug fixes or similar, or also consider sponsoring the project, which allows the continuous development of it. And this is my slide. Thanks to participating, all of you. It's been really great being able to present at least online. I enjoy that. Thank you for all the questions. That was really fun to see that some people were so interested, asking very good questions. Also, we found an issue which we will fix, and it leaves us right now with 3 minutes, which I'm still open to any questions you still might have. Okay, it seems that there are none, so I assume I give back to you, Shay, in case you're still there.
I'm here. Thank you, Dan. I will be closing the session now. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you and goodbye.